Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be interviewing Bunky Luffman, who is the Director of Administration, is it?
Yes, he's the director. I like to call him the DOA of Wycomico.
DOA of Wycomico. We're going to be asking him a lot of questions about what he does in his role, what he thinks about local political things, and his views on a number of different matters.
Absolutely, and we want to get a perspective that is not of an elected official, because here with Bridging the Gap, we want to bridge the gap between what's going on, not from a political standpoint, but what's truly going on behind the scenes and the people getting that knowledge.
Yes. Let's cut over to our interview.
Hello, welcome to Bridging the Gap. I'm David James.
And my name is Colin McEvers. Today we have a special guest here, County Administrator Bunky Luffman.
Hi, it's great to be here today. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you for being here.
Actually, is that the Director of Administration, right? Is there a difference between those two?
I think they're different counties have different titles, but they're essentially the same.
Okay. I did a little research. I looked on good old Google to find out what the description of or your job description would be, and you can let me know if they're accurate with this, because we know anyway. It says that your job is as the County Director of Administration is a key leadership position within the executive branch of the county. Your responsibility is overseeing the work of various agencies and departments, ensuring efficiency and compliance, and coordinating with the county's budget process. In essence, the Director of Administration plays a crucial role of ensuring the smooth and efficient functioning of the county's executive branch. That sound about right?
Yeah, that's true. In terms that, because everybody knows about federal government, it's sort of a blend of a chief of staff and a vice president. And the reason I say vice president is because if the county executive is no longer able to hold office, like when Bob Culver passed away, the director of administration becomes acting. So automatically, there no action has to happen. That automatically happens. But yeah, it's a chief of staff where you work with all the department heads. Also, in the charter, I have to, by charter, work on the budget and present it to the county executive. That's under my purview.
So, with that being said, what's the difference in the two jobs of the county executive and the director of administration?
So the county executive has a very wide area that they can go into, and they can sort of tailor the position toward themselves, though there are charter requirements. For example, you're not allowed to have another job outside of being county executive. You can't have your own business or work a different place. You have to devote your time to being county executive. But yeah, there's different county executives sort of focus on different things, and myself and County Executive Julie Giordano work together on just about everything. But of course, I have a background in Department of Natural Resources and water and wastewater from my time with the city of Salisbury. So sort of I head up those kinds of things. And ultimately, if there's a decision to be made, it's her decision. But I'm the one who's sort of point person with our staff on different things like that, where I have a clear background in it. I also planning and zoning, because I was chairman of planning and zoning for Delmar, Delaware, and Delmar, Maryland. So I work a lot with our planning and zoning department head as well.
Wow. It's interesting. I noticed that when she started running for office, I didn't see you as much in the beginning, but I think, was it right around the end of primary you came around? And you were out there with her, knocking doors, right along with her. I was talking to Colin earlier. I didn't see that as, I just find that as something unique, because as the director of administration, you are not elected, but you were out there working.
So, and there were people, and that is unique, because there were people I spoke to that said, look, if you're going to be director of administration, you should sort of do your best to not be political. And the way I looked at it, though, is I knew her before from different things, but we didn't really know each other super well. And I thought, look, if I jump on this campaign and volunteer and help her out, I'll get to spend a lot more time with her. And then by the end of it, if she's elected, me and her will know each other a lot better. And, ultimately, if she puts if she's going to put my name up at director of administration, she'll sort of have an idea of what I bring to the table, and I'll have an idea of what it's like working for her. And it was funny. I was just talking about this the other day with someone, and I said, and I'm really glad that I did that. I'm glad, even though it's not the traditional path, I'm glad I did it because it really did. I think we were able to solidify a friendship before we then layered on top, employee boss kind of thing, which honestly doesn't always work. I mean, sometimes I've worked places where I've had a friend who worked for me or vice versa, and sometimes that creates tension, but we've really been seamless. So.
Yeah, I've been impressed.
Definitely. So on that note, and we kind of touched on it a little bit, how would you describe your current relationship with the county executive?
Well, what's great is that we sort of do have a basis in friendship and respect, and we've gotten to know each other. And she knows my wife and kids. I know Ralph, her husband, and her kids, and so you get to know each other's family, and you have this amount of respect for each other, and it just sort of allows a good mutual relationship where, as a county executive in a staff role, you have to know, or in any sort of supportive role like this, you have to know the ultimate decision is the elected officials, and that's appropriate. So, but what you want as a staffer in a key role like this is you want someone that you can go to and say, I really think this is what you should do in this situation, or this is how I would look at it. And they give you a legitimate airing to say, this is what I think. Then ultimately they decide either way, and they have to because the people put them there. They didn't put me in my position. The people put her there, and so you have to respect the voice of the people in making them the elected official. And I think sometimes what staff does is they start thinking, I know better than the elected official. And maybe they do, or I don't know, but it's inappropriate. I mean, because the people put the elected official there. And if you think you know better and you don't want to, to go along, or you don't think that you're being heard or having an impact, you should probably look for another job, But we've had like I said, a great friendship, and then also a partnership in government, but also while also maintaining that integrity of she is clearly the county executive and I am clearly the Department of Administration without blurring those roles.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Speaking of staff, I recently started working at the congressional office of Andy Harris, and that's been
Congratulations.
interesting. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. Today was my first day, so I was a little bit late coming here because I told David that I'd be here at 3 to begin with, taking notes and preparing, but it was very interesting. I know that your son, who's still in high school, is going to be working there as an intern too. So that's
smart young man.
Very impressive. What grade is he in actually?
He is in 10th. He's going through driver's ed right now. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like going into 10th grade, or
no? He'll be going into 11th.
Into 11th grade.
Wow.
How did he go about applying? Is there there's no age limit for, or what is the age limit? Is it 16 or something like that, or?
I don't know, but I was surprised because I had assumed the age limit was 18, but apparently it's not. So I was like, okay, you can apply for this if you like, So.
Well, that's awesome. Is he politically involved already? I know obviously he's going to work for the office of a congressman, but would you say that he's also politically involved?
Yeah, he's way more politically involved than I was at his age. So he follows things, and we have discussions on it. And it's funny because my wife is not political at all. So
interesting.
Me and him we'll go and we'll talk, and what have you. But yeah, he's really engaged on any sort of policy thing you can think about.
Wow. That's really cool. What do you think the importance is of young people at a young age, getting involved in politics? Starting out early, because a lot of people kind of push it off until they're a bit older.
Yeah.
But what do you think the significance of people getting involved at a young age is?
Well, what's great is if you get involved at a younger age, whether on a campaign side or official side, it gives you sort of a look into what government's like, whether it's local, state, or federal. And that's a knowledge, even if you don't go on to work in those kinds of jobs, either elected official or staff. It gives you a leg up on how things actually operate in government. Because one of the issues, from a staff's perspective, I've done constituent work for 15 years or more, and just some people don't understand sort of how things work. Like, for instance, if the county gets money from the state, I don't know, let's say to do a street or what have you, or some project, then some people will be like, well, they could have used that money for this over here, but often that money that we get from the state actually has a string attached. It has to go for that purpose.
Right,
the choice isn't, can we take this money and do a road or do this? It's, we can take this money to do a road, or we can not get the money and they'll send it to another county. So it's getting to just know those fundamental things is extremely important, and I think helps you out. And I don't remember who said it, but there's a quote that said, "You may not be interested in politics, but one day politics will be interested in you." Sort of as the General Assembly and different folks, elected officials pass different laws and regulations and stuff that impact your life, whether you realize it or not.
One of the characteristics of you that I really admire is that you're a man of faith, and that's very admirable. As a matter of fact, I think you just got your license. Didn't you just get your license a couple of years back or so?
Oh yeah, I've had my ordination where I can marry folks. Yeah,
that's awesome. That's awesome. Now, how does that tie into like being a man of faith, like working with people who are really get stressed out? Because politics, to say it like this, is stressful, even for someone who's not a actual elected official. So, how does that help?
Well, it gives you. So the job I have, and honestly, the county executive job, can be incredibly stressful at different times of the year with different issues come up, and being a person of faith really gives you an opportunity to prayerfully consider things and sort of. Which helps with stress. I really am a big believer in prayer. Really helps stress, but also you're compelled by the Bible to sort of look at other people's perspective, and I think that's immensely important, because if someone disagrees with you on something, it might not, it probably isn't that they're adversarial to you, they just disagree with this policy or what have you. And if you can put it in a proper context, and I think faith helps do that. Also, faith puts everything in context, because
absolutely,
look, there's certain things I want, in the budget, there's certain things county executives want, things like that. But occasionally there's things we want that we don't get, for government, whether it's project or what have you. And if you sort of have the faith perspective, you're like, well, I believe that thing was incredibly earthly important. It's not heavenly important. It gives you a context of your whole life.
I like that.
Where in that context sort of turns the volume down on that. And it's like, okay, well, that is earthly important that we do that thing. But, it's not as important as many other things in life.
Right. And I know that I've had these conversations before. I do believe that working in government, if you don't stay calm or have something to keep you at peace, you could really go crazy. So I think that there's been a definite help for the executive having you around.
Definitely, I agree. David has recently been bringing me to church with him, and I started going more frequently back, starting in Easter. So it's been really helpful. Yeah. So in that regard, I had a question, but I forgot actually.
That's okay. Okay.
You have the this is where the questions are. I only have a few things here, but he has some more questions.
Yep. Yeah. Well, again, we're going to kind of wrap it up here, but term limits. I'm going to talk about that for a few minutes. It's something that actually I got to give you props also with the Question A thing. With you being the DOA, as I like to call it, Director of Administration, you would think somebody who's non-elected would be like, well, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. Why do we need it? But you felt strong about that, and I got to give you props. I really felt good how you were out there with that. But the other part of that would be term limits. There's a lot of people, I'm not talking about here locally or just here locally, that are really burned out in politics. If term limits are to pass, which I know the executive's behind, let's just say she does get reelected, would you be considering running for executive down the road?
Well, so, and she knows this, so I might be
I know it's a
making
loaded
news
question.
on other things. But so going into this last executive election, I really thought that someone I served with in the town council, I was on town council in Delmar when Carl Anderson was mayor. And I, like a lot of people, thought he was going to run for county executive. And when he didn't, honestly, I had people call me and say, would you consider running for county executive? And I considered it for, I don't know, a week, 10 days, and I can't tell you how many times I prayed about it and different. I didn't get to the stage where I asked my wife. So look, you gotta
There is that stage.
you gotta do two things. You gotta prayerfully consider big decisions like that, and also when you're married, you have to ask your spouse. But I really did, and at the time, I really felt that strongly that I would be better in a staff role. But I would go through that same. I'd go through that same procedure, which is, if she's reelected and there's a two-term term limit that's passed, somewhere probably, I don't know, 18 months, 2 years before, her term would lapse, I would sort of go through that process, and I would figure it out. I mean, but I can't, and I don't want to. I'm not trying to cop out. That's just sort of.
No.
That's sort of. I'm open to it, but I don't know that ultimately I'd do it. So.
Well, let me ask you one last thing about term limits. How do you feel personally about term limits, and do you know a little bit more about what's going on with the process?
Yeah, I'm fine with term limits. To me, the most. The most powerful force in American politics is the voice of the voter. And if the voters want term limits, then they should have term limits. So, I can't even imagine. Our country would be fundamentally different if we did not impose term limits, after we have FDR for 4 terms,
Right.
So, and I guess you could argue either way for the good or the bad, but I like that we have presidential term limits, and honestly, probably would be bad to have congressional term limits. So it makes sense to me, and I'm going to vote for it. But if there's an argument against, I'd be open to hearing people. Now, what I've heard is some folks will say, well, there are term limits. It's called the vote, so the voters can impose a term limit by voting people out. But I'm going to vote for it because, like I said, it makes sense to me. I'm glad we have term limits on the president. So.
Absolutely.
I've heard that argument a lot too. That the people can just vote people out, and that's the term limit itself. Yeah. But if term limits are a viable option to be on the ballot, they can vote to get that on. They can vote to impose those as well. I mean, it still boils down to a vote being held. Yeah. And I guess it'll depend upon whether or not people put that on the ballot for 2026.
Well, yeah, and the voters can vote for it or against it. And if we do term limits, and they decide, at certain point down the line, they don't want them anymore, they can put that back on the ballot and repeal them. I mean, so they're, and that's sort of, not to get off on a tangent, but sometimes you hear people talk about the Constitution as a living document. It is not, only to the extent it's a living document that the states and the people have the right to amend the Constitution. It's not a living document where you can get a new Supreme Court who looks at a question totally different than whatever anyone ever does, and you sort of change our Constitution by judicial. What you do is you put in the new amendment. And you go through that process. That's why it's there. Of course, no one's done that in the last, probably since the Equal Rights Amendment failed in the 70s. It's a lot of work. It takes years and years. And unfortunately, people try to shortcut it through lawsuit and things like that. But that's the appropriate way to do it. So, and just like this, there's an appropriate way to do it. It looks like the folks are going about it the right way. They're getting the signatures to get it on the ballot, and then ultimately the voters of our county will speak.
Yeah, we were actually going to be down third Friday to get more signatures, and it's been everybody coming up to us, and I think that's been really awesome. Now, I've got one last question, and I like to call this, let's keep them at 100. It's something I actually spoke to you earlier about, and it's concerning the homeless population in the shelter. I've noticed that there's a shelter here in Salisbury that right around the corner there's the is it the county liquor board right there in the shopping center there.
There's a dispensary. So the liquor dispensary is run by a board that's appointed by the governor, and that board in turn, hires or keeps on, because I've had the same one, a sort of general manager to run the operation. And there's
Okay.
3 of those locations around the county.
I was wondering, I mean, how do you feel about the fact that, like, there's a shelter literally behind it, and a lot of I don't know if you hear any reports, but I see unfortunately, a lot of the homeless that have this dependency on alcohol lingering around there. What do you think about maybe the county moving that?
Well, you'd have to talk to the liquor control board and get their input. I don't know the term how long their lease is or that kind of thing, but I think it's worth the conversation, and they meet, and you could potentially get on the agenda and present the case, and then when their lease is up, or maybe they're allowed out of the lease early, then yeah, they could look for another location. I mean, I wouldn't have a issue with it. It makes some sense to me. So
Okay, thank you.
That place is right next to Acme, the shopping center, too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Yeah,
it is.
So that could, definitely, it being there, in my opinion, could definitely present some safety concerns. And I know some people have complained about, violence and crime happening in that area, in the Acme
Absolutely.
shopping center area.
Yeah,
So-
and then there's a substance abuse clinic also across the street from there.
Wow. Okay.
So
I see.
it's a concern there. Again, anything that concerns the people, you know what I mean, we want to definitely address. so.
Definitely. And that board is controlled by a person that the governor appoints.
the
right?
governor appoints a 3-member board,
Okay.
and then they in turn. And like I said, they've kept this person on for a while. My understanding is they're the ones who hire or what have you with the
Right.
general manager. But yeah, this is, even though, and we get this all the time, like with the health department here is called Wycomico County Department of Health.
Right.
It's a state agency. But we get calls all the time about the county health department, but it's not county. This is the Wycomico County Liquor Control Board, but it's not a county board. It's a governor's board.
Wow.
So
Wow.
the most that the county people, the executive branch or whatever it might be could do is just like, maybe talk to people
Yeah.
in state government.
Ask.
That's the most, but it's
Well, yeah.
not their decision in and of itself. It's the most they
Right.
could do is maybe like bring it up to people in
Good
charge of the
question.
Yeah,
statewide.
and they'll be getting the governor did appoint 3 new people that start July 1st. Now, I don't know what the date is of their first meeting after that, but I would think they'd be open to hearing, about that. And, it's an issue, and so it makes sense.
So those that are listening right now, if you're interested in that, again, we're talking about the fact that there is a liquor board that's controlled by the state that's right around the corner from the shelter over here in Salisbury, and rather it should be moved away from there than cause more. To limit the problems that happen over that way, but.
Yeah, additionally, it could be a problem for regular citizens or residents who are shopping at these places, especially if it's late at night. And even if the shelter weren't close, a liquor store right around that area, I'm not sure. But anyhow, I'd also want to learn a little bit more about it.
Absolutely.
But my last question for
Absolutely.
you is actually regarding a District 1 issue. It's not particularly related to Wycomico, but it's kind of like a theoretical thing. So in Queen Anne's and Talbot counties, they were deemed sanctuary jurisdictions by the Department of Homeland Security. And both of them have released statements stating that this was a mistaken classification. So what typically happens with the county? How does the county government deal with a classification of that sort? And if something like this were to happen in Wycomico, what do you think the executive branch would do about it?
Well, yeah, we would go. So if we were mislabeled like that, we would go to Congressman Harris, both U.S. senators, and also there's a constituent liaison, and I probably got that title wrong, but essentially a constituent liaison at the White House that we would contact, and I'm sure that's what those counties did. I know Congressman Harris put out a statement with it, but the sanctuary thing is really odd, because what those jurisdictions do when they do the sanctuary status, my understanding is ICE immigration will put a detainer on someone, And so when they're in a county jail, the process should be, if they're going to let them go, you call the federal government who has the detainer, and then they can come get them. And some of the counties and local jurisdictions around the country have ignored those detainers and allowed these people to go free.
Oh, wow.
And unfortunately, to tragic, consequences with people, being killed and things like that by letting, criminals out when they had a detainer on them. And it's just... I was surprised when I saw that, but then thankful. I was like, okay, I didn't think Talbot and Queen Anne's County were under that jurisdiction. But there are several other counties that are in Maryland, and it's unfortunate. It makes sense to me that if you're a local government and a federal government says, hey, we have evidence of this person who we believe is a criminal, we're going to put a detainer, it makes sense to me that you would comply with that order. And I can't imagine, I have to say, I can't imagine any scenario where a county who has Sheriff Mike Lewis would ignore a detainer from ICE. And also I should say, sheriffs in Maryland are in the Maryland Constitution. They are their own unique elected official. So while it's true that the county, and the county executive's budget and the budget the county council is going to vote on funds, the sheriff's office, they are totally free from influence or what have you from the county council or the county executive to make a lot of those decisions. So
wow, well that's really cool, especially when we think about Maryland itself. With the current. Not to be too political, but our governor, I believe, openly stated that he didn't necessarily want to comply with the more harsh immigration policies of the Trump administration, even when it comes to things like these. Making sure that criminals that are coming here illegally are detained properly, and I can see a lot of counties in our state, frankly, being labeled as that because of their inability to comply. But obviously, I wouldn't think of Talbot and Queen Anne's as being counties to be in that general trend just because they're on the Eastern Shore and they're generally considered red districts or red areas. But okay, well that's very helpful. Thank you for the insight.
Yeah.
Well, and it's a federal issue, and as far as a local government, I don't want to take on, we don't have a county ICE. I don't want to take on immigration.
Right.
We have enough to do.
Gosh.
We're dealing with, with our budget and what have you. So it's appropriate for the federal government to do federal government things, and immigration's one of them. So certainly.
Well, wow. This has been a great interview, and I'm looking forward to possibly having you back on again. Yeah.
That's thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. We really appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you all for tuning in. And we're looking forward to great things happening in Wycomico.
Thank you. Tune in for next week's episode.
We're here next week?
I don't know, something.
We should leave that part in there. We're here next
Good
week.
idea, next week. All right, everybody. So you just heard from Bunky, Luffman. Now we're together to talk about
this
a
is
little
the
bit.
wrap-up.
This is the wrap-up. This was an awesome interview. What stuck out to you about it?
Just the fact that he was genuine. He was genuine in what he was saying, and I think that he's got to be the most selfless person I've ever seen. Like, literally, he's not about the I, he's about the team, and I just thought it was a really good interview.
Definitely, he seems really knowledgeable. I mean, obviously, he's the director of administration. He's second to
he's the DOA.
DOA, the DOA.
Wycomico.
But I found it very. His son is in 10th grade.
Yes,
he's
going
into
grade.
11th grade, and the fact
Super
that
smart.
He's already going to become an intern with Andy Harris is totally crazy. But I think we should definitely reach out to him. What's his name? Let's not say his name.
Well, yeah, we don't want to do that quite yet. But I do want to say this, that he's cut from a good mold. Mm-hmm. And again, I want to get back on a couple of things that stuck out when talking to Bunky was the fact that he's not afraid to attack the situation from not this is how we got to do it because this is what the political party. He's ready to attack situations from this is the common sense way. You know what I mean? And you don't find that a lot with people that are in government, that they're so down to earth on how they handle things, but he's he's got a lot of connects, and I think that's really, really good. And his son is just literally, he's cut from that mold. And like you, I think that y'all are definitely the future, and the future is not about a political party, but it's purpose-driven, as we are here with Bridging the Gap. I did want to cover something while we're talking here about what Bridging the Gap's here for, because sometimes I think we just need a refresher course, Colin he's a busy young man, but he's very much devoted to bringing forth information to the constituents of this county. And the word unbiased, that's what we are. And, there's been a lot of talk here lately about whether or not this person or that person is behind our show. No, we do this for the community. And I just think that that's something that we should cover. So
Yeah, definitely. I try to make sure that our show, and I know that you do too, make sure that we're bringing in people from different political views. We had in that congressional candidate who I don't necessarily agree with at all on a lot of things. That guy, I'm blanking on his name at the moment, but I know that he was very much against deportation, for instance, and I definitely don't agree with that. I think deportation is a very good solution towards dealing with our illegal immigrant problem in the United States, and I commend the current administration for that. So I, as a person, am a bit biased because I'm a Republican. I'm not going to lie about that. I'm a right-leaning individual, and I think that's the best way to move this country forward. However, I think it's good to also talk with other people with different viewpoints and different perspectives. Now, we actually talked about something in regards to illegal immigration and deportations today. We were discussing the issue in Talbot County and Queen Anne's, which I just learned about today, actually, where they've been designated as sanctuary districts, which is a classification the current administration has made for counties, for districts, for local governments that are not complying with the administration's goals and priorities of dealing with the illegal immigrant problem in the United States. Kind of releasing people that have been detained, not complying with the policies that are in place, and this was mistakenly given to Talbot and Queen Anne's County from all available evidence, which is unfortunate. We asked Bunky about what would the process be for if that had happened in Wrapup County, which is theoretical. It hasn't happened, but and he gave us a good answer that they would work with members of the federal government to rectify that issue, which is what they're currently doing. But it can't be denied that a lot of counties in the state of Maryland do fall under that categorization of sanctuary districts because they are kind of standing in defiance against what the current administration is trying to do.
Sure.
Which is unfortunate. It's an unfortunate thing, and I think it's supported by our current governor, Wes Moore, who doesn't want to comply with the administration's priorities. But it was good to hear from Bunky about what he thought about it, what he would do from a county government kind of perspective.
Right. Well, I want to add this also where you were talking about the differences of opinion. And, we want to make sure that people are given information for them to make the decision upon. Like if you watch our Chopping It Up shows, you'll see people from different point of view speaking. We have to learn to rejoice on those things that we agree upon, and then we'll work on those things that we don't. But we'll never do that if we don't communicate and talk and get together. I mean, I'm pretty sure as we're just moving into our second month here on Pack 14 that there's going to be people that we have on the show that may not be our cup of tea, and we may not be their cup of tea. But, if we sit down and actually communicate, which I think that communities lack. I always like to say this, but you can't spell community without unity. And you're not going to have unity if you don't first have communication. So I just think that as what's always has been the focus here, and as we are purpose-driven here at Bridging the Gap, we need to work together and speak to one another to bridge that gap. And I just want to say, as the founder of Bridging the Gap, the day that we stop doing that or we become biased with our own thought as being the reason why we do this show, that'll be the day we no longer do this show. But I think Colin and I are going to continue to do this show because our motive is to make sure that we bridge that gap between community and what's going on.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you, and please tune into our next episode.
Which
And
you said was going to be next week, so.
Might be. We might.
We do
be
got
on here,
some
whether
good-
it be me or you or both of us, whatever it is.
Well, we do got some good people coming up that we could be interviewing, so stay tuned, folks.